Charging for waste, the rising cost of recycling our rubbish. Two-thirds of local authorities tell ITV News they've increased their charges as we uncover more evidence of grotspot Britain.
This is normally a quiet country lane, but just look at it now, 100 metres of dumped waste weighing an estimated 500 tonnes. What you're seeing here is fly tipping on an industrial scale.
Also tonight, trouble for Trump. His national security advisor resigns over his relationship with Russia. UKIP leader Paul Nuttall admits his claims he lost a close personal friend at Hillsborough are false. And puffing its way into the history books, the first scheduled steam service for 50 years.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. ITV News has learned that almost two-thirds of councils across Britain have ramped up their prices for waste disposal from households and businesses. More and more local authorities are charging for services like disposal of bulky items, DIY waste and commercial rubbish. Yesterday we revealed the huge scale of illegal fly tipping across the UK, and there are fears that rising council charges are fueling that problem. Our consumer editor Chris Choi has this special report on Grotspot Britain.
Overnight, a country lane in Staffordshire was turned into this, a vast illegal dump. There are fears that some official policies are adding to this blight of fly tipping across Britain, leaving people to face more of this mess.
There's hospital waste in. My grandson comes down here on his bike. If he fell in and there was needles in it or any contamination, he would be poisoned or whatever.
This is normally a quiet country lane, but just look at it now, 100 metres of dumped waste weighing an estimated 500 tonnes. What you're seeing here is fly tipping on an industrial scale.
There's construction, household, even medical refuse. It's happened in an area where district councils have increased bulky waste dumping charges. That raises the issue of whether rising fees result in fly tipping. Perhaps not on this extreme scale, but still a concern for those who encounter it.
What we don't know is what's inside it.
No, it could be hazardous, couldn't it, or toxic, or you don't even know what's underneath it. And it smells as well.
323 councils around Britain responded to our Freedom of Information requests on waste disposal charges. Some have introduced fees for household DIY waste, including Leicestershire, Bournemouth and Bracknell Forest. Our new findings also show prices for dumping commercial waste were up by as much as 15% at councils including Merthyr Tydfil, Gedling and Ealing. And we found councils have also increased charges for disposal of bulky waste up to 15%, including Wakefield, Highland and Derbyshire Dales. In the corner of a pleasant Essex field, we filmed this, illegally dumped waste towering 10 feet. This is one of the areas where construction and commercial waste is now banned from county council recycling centres. Another policy, some say, increases fly tipping.
Well, it will fuel the problem quite a lot, yeah, because where are you going to take it, apart from sites like ours?
Councils say there's no excuse for criminal fly tipping and no evidence their policies add to it. But around Britain, wherever there are these grot spots, there are also demands that more is done to prevent them.
Amazing pictures, aren't they? What's the government said about this problem?
Well, it's got really fascinating because I spoke to the Department for Communities and Local Government and they told me that those charges for DIY waste are against the rules. Surprising perhaps because we saw in our research that a lot of councils are doing it. So we said to central government, what will you do about it? They said if people are unhappy about the fees, they should complain using the local government ombudsman. So a big row brewing over that, I think.
And you asked yesterday for viewers to get in touch, and you've been pretty much inundated, haven't you?
Yeah, and some very depressing stuff. I mean, just have a look at this, sent in from near Accrington in Lancashire. About 30 lorry loads piled up. If you look carefully, you'll see sofas and plastic, just piles of rubble and rubbish. It's been there for about 5 months whilst an investigation goes on. Speaking of investigations, look very carefully at what I'm going to show you now. This is a video that has come in, and it actually shows fly tippers caught on camera. They haven't been caught in real life yet, so look and see if you can identify these characters. The council in Hammersmith and Fulham is looking for these people. We're also sent this video by a viewer showing the terrible mess they left behind. About 100 tonnes, would you believe, of building waste and rubble. And what is really galling for everybody living in that area is the clean-up costs there will be about £40,000. Another way that this problem is costing us all.
Amazing, isn't it, Chris? Thank you very much. Well, if you have your own examples of Grotspot Britain, go to our website, where there's also an interactive map showing some of the very worst examples, and that's at itv.com/news. Moving on now, and President Trump is embroiled in another political storm tonight after a key aide quit less than a month into the job. Michael Flynn resigned as National Security Advisor after it emerged that he had discussed lifting sanctions with the Russian ambassador before taking office. And it's left Mr Trump facing more damaging questions. Here's our Washington correspondent, Robert Moore.
Good morning. Breaking overnight, Michael Flynn resigns as
If the Trump presidency was in turmoil already, it has now been plunged into perilous territory. General Flynn, a key Trump loyalist, is out after less than a month. The man who gave this warning to Iran,
as of today, we are officially putting Iran on notice.
has now been given notice himself and ejected from the White House. Flynn appeared to have curiously close links to the Kremlin, even sitting next to President Putin at this dinner in 2015. What sealed his fate was a phone call he made to the Russian ambassador even before Trump took office. He told the vice president he had not discussed sanctions, but he had, meaning Mike Pence misled the nation with this comment.
I talked to General Flynn yesterday, and the conversations that took place at that time were not in any way related to new U.S. sanctions.
There is now a sense of crisis swirling around the White House, with many Republicans in extreme discomfort and Democrats pouncing.
Flynn was secretly communicating with Russian officials at the same time that Russia was attacking our democracy.
Hello, everybody. The bigger question is whether the president instructed Flynn to discuss lifting sanctions with the Russians. Trump was today meeting teachers, making no comment to reporters, but he issued this tweet. The real story here is, why are there so many illegal leaks coming out of Washington? Will these leaks be happening as I deal on North Korea, etc.? On Friday aboard Air Force One, he had denied any knowledge of Flynn's conversation with the Russians, even though the acting Attorney General had raised the alarm.
I don't know about it. I haven't seen it. What report is that?
I, Stephen Mnuchin, do solemnly swear.
Last night, Mike Pence and Donald Trump were in the Oval Office swearing in the new Treasury Secretary. But pressure is quickly growing for a full congressional inquiry on the mysterious links between the administration and the Kremlin. Now, one of the most celebrated and damaging questions in Washington is being asked, with its echoes of Watergate. What did the president know, and when did he know it?
Well, the administration right now under enormous pressure. Just a few minutes ago, the White House spokesman saying that Donald Trump had simply lost all confidence and trust in Mike Flynn. Some Republicans in the Senate are now saying that there needs to be a congressional investigation. Democrats are asking the damaging question of whether Trump is hiding his own secret links to Russia. And even some intelligence professionals in this town are asking the extraordinary question of whether the West Wing has actually been penetrated by the Russian security services.
Robert Moore in Washington, thank you. Well, here the leader of UKIP has been forced to admit that claims he lost close personal friends, as he put it, in the Hillsborough disaster are false. The claims are on Paul Nuttall's website and have since been removed. As Sejal Kare reports, it's the latest of several awkward questions that he's faced about the disaster.
Not even 3 months into his UKIP leadership, and Paul Nuttall's embroiled in controversy, facing questions about Hillsborough over claims on his own website that he lost close personal friends in the disaster, claims he now admits are untrue. In January 2012, a statement on his site quoted him as saying, "I lost close personal friends at that match," a claim he'd also made 6 months earlier. Both statements have now been taken down. Today, he was confronted with the evidence during an interview with a Liverpool radio station.
You say you lost a close personal friend. It's on your website.
I haven't lost a close personal friend. I've lost someone who I know, but I don't know who's written.
January 9th, 2012, on your own site.
That is.
Lost close personal friends. It's on your website.
Well, that's not from me. I'm sorry.
It's on your own website, Paul.
Well, that is absolutely. I'm sorry. I haven't lost anyone who's close. I haven't lost anyone who was a close personal friend. There's people who I knew through football and things like that.
And as for recent doubts that he even attended the match in 1989, when 96 fans were crushed to death, he had this to say.
I was there on that day. I've got witnesses, people who will stand up in court and back me 100%, OK?
But this episode will be embarrassing for Mr Nuttall, who's in the midst of fighting the Stoke by-election and raises questions over his integrity. Sejal Kare, ITV News.
Rising food and fuel prices have pushed inflation to its highest level for 2.5 years. The Consumer Prices Index was 1.8 last month. The last time it was that high was June 2014, with the figures were offset by the price of clothing and shoes, which have continued to fall. The French car maker Peugeot is in talks to buy Vauxhall and its European Opel business. Vauxhall employs around 35,000 people in the UK, and our business editor Joel Hills is here. If this goes ahead, what would it mean?
Well, it's a big if. We don't know it will at the moment. We got hold of a letter set by the US boss of General Motors reassuring staff it's business as usual until further notice. But this is concerned because GM's European business has been loss-making for a decade, Mary. It's the Vauxhall and Opel brands. There are about 8 factories across Europe, 2 Ellesmere Port and in Luton. And the union is very concerned tonight. 1, because this is a surprise. It didn't know anything about it. 2, because Peugeot Citroën has a reputation as a cost cutter. And 3, because this operation has been particularly vulnerable ever since our decision to leave the European Union. So it's urging the government to intervene. It's caught the government by surprise, but it's urging the government to intervene. And the General Secretary, Len McCluskey, we're determined to resist if there's any plan to close plants here.
OK, Joel, thank you. Still to come on the ITV Evening News. The family of a little girl killed by meningitis claimed that they have been let down by the government. And back to the golden age of steam. The scheduled service returning to the tracks after half a century. Those stories and more after the break. Join me then. Hello and welcome back. A new centre aimed at making Britain the toughest target in the world for computer hackers was opened by the Queen today. The National Cyber Security Centre aims to protect government, businesses and the public, as Richard Pallow reports.
We store more and more of our information and so our lives online. But in recent years, high-profile data breaches have left millions of British consumers compromised. The aim for our economy to become the most digitally diverse in the world comes with real risk. This Worcestershire software company knows that well. Russian hackers breaching their firewall and sending out fake invoices, one click, would reveal a customer's bank account details.
We were a target of a spoof attack, so 1.2 million emails were sent pretending to be us. The phones basically ran off the hook as they used our phone number. We had to get all hands to the pump to deal with it, and we used a couple of tricks up our sleeve to basically replace one of the images they used to say, "This is spam." So when people received that message in their inbox, they realised that immediately it was a spam message.
Research carried out by the government suggests that 65% of large businesses had a cyber attack in 2015. Almost a third of all those security breaches involved an online impersonation of an organisation. In all, cyber criminals costing the UK economy £11 billion annually. Today, the Queen officially opened it, but already in its first 3 months, the National Cyber Security Centre has dealt with almost 200 serious attacks on government and critical infrastructure.
I think our job is to make sure that we raise our national defences at individual, company, local government, central government level, so that we become the hardest target in the world for attackers.
But as one former hacker told us, too many organisations are still woefully unprepared.
It wasn't as if we were master hackers, or it was more because of the companies that were hacking. The organisations that we trust our data with have very poor security and are not investing enough.
Online risks can never be eliminated. Hopefully, though, this centre will help us all significantly. Richard Pallow, ITV News, Central London.
A 10-year-old boy who died inside a Topshop store in Reading suffered serious head injuries from a display barrier, police said today. Caden Reddick died in hospital after the accident in the Oracle Centre yesterday afternoon. Now, the father of a 2-year-old girl whose death from meningitis sparked a nationwide campaign says the government has done nothing in the years since she died. A graphic photo of Faye Burdett prompted calls for a vaccine to be given to more children. And a warning, this report from Sally Lockwood does contain that photograph of Faye.
Faye Burdett's parents made the heartbreaking decision to turn off her life support a year ago today. But they feel things could have ended very differently had they known how to spot the signs of meningitis B.
People need to realise that there's a lot more symptoms before that rash appears. When that rash appears, you're a long way down the line.
After Faye's death, they put aside their grief to raise awareness, bravely sharing this distressing image of Faye in hospital to warn other parents of meningitis. The picture prompted 820,000 people to sign a petition calling for the meningitis B jab Bexsero to be given to all children. The drug is only free on the NHS for babies between 2 and 12 months old. The government rejected extending the vaccine to 2-year-olds, but promised to launch an awareness campaign. A year on, the Burdettes say nothing's been done.
To go through that petition, believing you can change something for the better, and get that much support, which really blew us away how much support there was. And for them to basically just ignore it, which is kind of what's happened, it hurts.
The Department of Health has said more than 1 million babies have been vaccinated since September 2015, but campaigners say it's no way near enough.
We want to see the meningitis B vaccine offered to the under 5s and adolescents as well. Of all infectious diseases, meningitis is the biggest killer of children in this country.
Faye's parents say they're very proud of her for her legacy, and they want far more done to spare other parents their pain. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
And finally, the sight and sound of a steam locomotive returned to one of Britain's most glorious railways today. For the first time in decades, a scheduled service crossed the picturesque Ribblehead Viaduct in the Yorkshire Dales. Ben Chapman joined hundreds of enthusiasts watching its historic return.
Please stand back on the edge of platform 3, there's a train in front.
It was the perfect day for romance to return to the railways. For the first time in 5 decades, the sights and sounds of steam on a schedule. Thousands of passengers packed onto the platforms of this rural line, hoping for a ticket to another era.
We all love steam trains, don't we, boys?
Yeah.
Yeah?
We used to stay at home, we're miserable, but we're travelling on this one today.
30 years on the railway, you do many jobs, and this is the icing on the cake in a lot of respects.
The Settle and Carlisle line, an endurance test for engines and engine men alike.
They were following in the tracks of Britain's last steam passenger service that ran across this viaduct in 1968. Its return marks the reopening of the line a year after landslides closed it. The locomotive is historic too. Tornado is the first to be built in Britain since the 60s. But while the steam may be from a different time on this line, this week it's the norm, with 4 more scheduled services over the next 2 days.
This is the Northern Rail service from Skipton to Appleby.
Passengers paid £17 return, the standard fare, but for a very special ride.
A fantastic opportunity. We booked as soon as we knew about it.
It brings back the memories of the steam trains when you could be working in the fields and set your clock to the train times.
It's just how different they are compared to what we have nowadays.
Whether something new or nostalgic, this was a journey back to a golden age of travel. Ben Chapman, ITV News, Skipton.
And that is all for now. Tom's here at 10, but from me and all the team, have a great evening. Bye-bye.